What does your crazy neighbor do to be labeled the crazy neighbor? Had severe anger issues and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago, he had a road rage incident, and when he started banging on the other car's window, the occupants got out and beat him badly. During this time, he had a heart attack and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back. Also, he doesn't yell anymore. Well, I guess if you're always picking fights with people, you're gonna lose eventually. My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons, too much noise, etc. Nope, because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt them. My sister lives in the UK. You know, it kind of baffles me, just the kind of information that gets into some people's heads. Like, where does something like this even come from? He jumped in front of my car while I was driving down the road to yell at me for going through his trash at night. I told him it was probably raccoons. He refuses to believe it to this day. Well, now you probably should go through his trash because he's clearly hiding something. She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night. This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, though she's slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways. Yeah, that's something that's kind of ridiculous. Like, when everyone knows that somebody is doing something like that, but a court would just be like, well, sorry, there's no hard proof, I guess they can just keep getting away with it. Like, at that point, just start setting up bear traps around your car. Pulled us over pretending to be a police officer, saying that we had somehow broken the law whilst pulling out of our driveway and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop. How do you even pull somebody over if you're not a cop? I mean, I guess you could try and buy just like a flashing light to put on your car. I'm pretty sure it's illegal for regular people to even buy those, though. My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants, and meows at people who pass by. He's not dangerous at all, but he is not right in the head either. His caretakers are his parents, and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me, he just likes to be a cat, and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. I thought I had read that wrong at the start when it said that his neighbor meows at people. Took my parents to court because he lost in our HOA chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. Man, I had no idea that HOAs were like this elaborate. Like, you actually have a whole board of members and you have to elect people. Like it's some tiny neighborhood government. Man, I just want to be left alone. Keep those HOAs away. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and a truck. And over the course of a few months, I realized that she was no longer parking her car in the garage like she had for many years prior to that. Then suddenly the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening, and she'd grab 2 2x4s and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was doing with it, she didn't have an answer. Oh, look who we have here. I wonder if she's run into any crazy neighbors outside. We had one a while back that had a meth lab in the home. Crazy fights, yelling at all hours of the night. Dude would wander around the hood, tweaked out crazy. And once he threw a Molotov cocktail out of the 2nd floor window at another dude who was smashing up his car, screaming, "I'll freaking kill you, MFer." Those were interesting times. Hey, at least it'll drive the price of the neighborhood down so your friends can move in. This older lady lives across the street from me, and she is obsessed with leaves falling on her lawn, to the point that she will come out of her house and pick up one individual leaf off the grass in the fall. She spends hours a day outside with the leaf blower in the fall. She will go and knock on other neighbors' doors if she thinks you have too many leaves on your grass. She'll come over into your yard and do it herself if you're not home. What I think is weird is that she's in her 70s, no kids or grandkids living with her, and lives alone in a pretty large 4-bedroom house with an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard, with a slide and diving board and everything. Nobody has used the pool in at least 5 years, yet she opens it up every summer. Somehow she likes my family and never once yelled at us about our leaves, and randomly brings things over like half-eaten gallons of ice cream, and asks if we want it because she's not using it. Yeah, stories like this are where, like, crazy theories come from when they suspect their neighbors are up to no good. I had a neighbor who wouldn't let anyone use his driveway because he didn't want it to get dirty. Anyone, including himself. He parked on the street outside. If he thought you were having a party, he would drag a bunch of plastic bags full of who knows what to the end of the driveway so no one could turn around it. One time I came home and he was outside hosing it down in the rain. To his credit, I've never seen a cleaner driveway. I mean, to people like this, I just have to say, what is the point? Like, what is your reasoning for this? She dug up my fancy flowers and replanted them in her own yard, 15 feet away. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this kind of thing lately, because, like, normally you would never leave something outside because you don't want it to get stolen. But people leave, like, their plants, like their flower pots, their lawn decorations, maybe some gardening tools or, like, shovels or stuff. But it's kind of just like an unwritten rule that people don't bother taking stuff out of your yard like that. So it's like, where does the line get drawn when it comes to, like, taking stuff off your neighbor's property? I used to live in a little town of 300 people where we had an elderly neighbor named Gladys. She would routinely look near our garbage can outside and take the recyclable bottles and cans we would leave for her. After we cleaned out a fish tank, we put the gravel and fake plants in a bag and left it on top of the garbage can because it was already full. About a week later, Gladys hollered at me while I was outside to come over as she wanted to show me something. She had taken that bag we had left and planted the fake plants along the side of her house. She said she wasn't real confident that they would make it, but so far they seem to be thriving. I could only nod and compliment her on her green thumb. Hey, I mean, if I'm throwing something away, people can do whatever they want with it. We bought a house, and on the day while we were unloading the first truckload, the neighbor came into our garage uninvited and started telling us what trees on our property he wanted us to cut down. Not the craziest, but the audacity of some people. That guy probably fought with the previous owners of the house that wouldn't budge, and so he's just waiting for the next people to move in, like, alright, as soon as they're here, I gotta get it. I gotta convince them. I used to live in an HOA. One of the members on the board lived across the street from my neighbor and I. He sent a letter to us saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days and in opposite patterns just to annoy the guy. Yeah, again with the HOAs, it's just like this weird dystopian kind of lifestyle that people want to just control how their whole neighborhood looks. It's like, you own your property, keep your own property looking good, don't worry about the rest. Well, I used to have a neighbor who was legitimately mentally ill, although I don't know his actual diagnosis. His truck wouldn't start one day because of a dead battery, and he told everyone on the street that another neighbor was stealing the electricity. He knew this because of the way the guy parked his vehicle. Obviously, it was sucking electricity from the ground for his battery, which drained the car batteries near him. Many times he would run down the street and warn everyone to hide their valuables because Japan was invading the country. He wasn't on drugs, but he did take medication for his mental illness, and everyone on the street could tell when he stopped taking it. Whenever he would start saying completely irrational things, we would remind him to take his medication, and then he would thank us and go home, presumably to take it. He lived alone, and he was getting older, so I think that he had a hard time remembering to take it. Well, that's the most rational crazy person I've ever heard of. She stalks us. Like every time I get home, she'll walk outside and tell me I was either 3 minutes late getting home this time, or that I'm home 2 minutes earlier, and then ask me why. One time my friend and her sister came to pick me up. The neighbor was against her window with her hands and face pressed up on the glass, trying to look at who was coming to pick me up. My friend and her sister were so terrified they called me to tell me to hurry up because a crazy lady was staring at them through a window. I replied, "Oh, it's just the stalker neighbor." Yeah, that was a funny day. Yeah, I think Faye has some stalkers. Every once in a while I'll wake up at 6 in the morning hearing cats just screaming and fighting over by the cat door. They chase Faye back to her house and then just sit outside waiting for her. I cared for an elderly woman for many years. She lived to the age of 93 in a crime-ridden inner-city neighborhood by being as tough and nasty as any criminal living nearby. Her oddest actions involved her incorrect belief that she owned the road in front of her house. She didn't even own a car, but she insisted that nobody parked there. She would confront them if they parked in front of her house. If they did it again, she slashed their tires in the middle of the night. Over and over for years, she was never caught, but everyone knew it was her. She only stopped when she lost the physical strength to slash a tire in her mid-80s. Then she started using spray paint on cars. "You don't park in front of my house no more," was all the justification she needed to damage her neighbors' cars. I mean, I think old ladies kind of have like a goodwill barrier around them, because most people aren't going to go up and attack someone like that. My house backs up to a resort. I'm slowly accumulating junk cars near the property line. Eventually they'll build a fence, then I'll get rid of all the junk. Bam, free fence. Well, that's a pretty interesting strategy I've never thought of before. The neighbor behind us had a leak in the water pipe, and rather than fix it, he just had the sump pump drain it out into the backyard. This meant that all year round the back of our yard was a little bit damp. Eventually the leaky pipe burst and filled the house with 5 feet of water. His solution to this was just to keep the pump running and flood the entire neighborhood. After about an hour, a posse of all the neighbors whose yards were being flooded confronted him and called the city to shut off the water. The city fixed the water pipe and the neighbors ended up with a large fine. At least my yard stays basically dry now. I should also mention that this neighbor once rented the house out to a bunch of crackheads, and it nearly burned down because the ex-girlfriend of one of those morons snuck in and set the house on fire. Yeah, sometimes cheap solutions can lead to more expensive problems. Years ago in rural Arizona, we shared a pond with the crazy neighbor. More sad than anything, he was in his mid-40s and lived with his mother, around 88. A Vietnam veteran, he would walk out to our shared pond with a .45 and a box of 50 rounds. He would then absolutely unload on the pond while yelling, police his brass, and walk quietly home. This happened every 90 days for about 3 years. I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but this is actually legal in a lot of places. She calls the city on everything. Ever walk out, look at your yard, and think, yep, I need to mow this weekend? That is the point where my neighbor will call the city and complain that my lawn is too long. If I park on the street, she will call the cops and complain that my car is in an abandoned vehicle, even though it has current tags and is parked in front of the house it's registered to. The cops got tired of dealing with her, and told me I need to park in my driveway and that I cannot park in the street or they'll tow my vehicle. If she sees my dogs outside, she'll call animal control, and claims they're being neglected and abused. She is currently going around the neighborhood telling people that I am poisoning her cats, which I'm apparently doing a horrible job of since the cats are healthy and very much still around. She is a truly awful person who is very much mentally unstable. She doesn't just do this to me though. Other neighbors on the block complain about the exact same thing. Sounds like you need to find a way to drive her out of the neighborhood. But I guess we'll finish off with, anyone else here suddenly realize the reason you don't have a crazy neighbor might be because you're the crazy neighbor? Well, I don't know if any of my neighbors notice me, but it's not uncommon for me around midnight or 1 a.m. to just go stand outside my house. Just like hang out in the driveway or out on the sidewalk, maybe walk around with the cat out front, just enjoying the weather. I don't know, I just really like nighttime. I like being outside at night, especially if it's warm. Maybe I'll just slip out and go for a walk. I kind of feel like people who are obsessed about their neighbors is more of an old-fashioned thing. It's probably not as common these days because I think people are more focused on things inside their own house and being on the internet and focusing on what's going on around the world, rather than just looking outside, as that was one of the only things there was to do back in the day. But that's all for today. I'll see you next time.